Okay, good evening and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, just Daf It. Tonight we're doing Nazir Daf Chavav number 26. A great share for you today, especially if you're a fan of Seir Kachim. We have some Kachim topics to talk about tonight. Obviously, it's very hard to relate to Kachim because we don't have a Beis HaMikdash now. But if we get a Beis HaMikdash, then the popularity of people joining Daf Yomi during Seir Kachim will significantly rise, which is good news for Eli Stefanski's marketing campaign because they're running out of ideas. It's easy to attract people during Moed and maybe Nashim, but once you get to Kachim, it's kind of hard to attract people. So Eli Stefanski is betting, hoping the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt by Seir Kachim. If not, they're gonna have to join my share because it's a lot more interesting. All right. So the Gemara says, in the bottom of Chav Hamud Beis, Amar Mar. We talked about in the beginning of yesterday's daf, Halacha l'Moshe Sinai is Halacha Moshe Sinai, specifically by the Korbanos of a Nazir, that if he sets aside money for the three Korbanos at the completion of his Nazirus, an Ola, Chazas, and Shlam, it doesn't say, is the money for all three Korbanos, is it for one Korban? He just sets aside some money. So the halacha Moshe Sinai is that if he dies, all the money technically is used for olas nedava, even though technically it includes probably a chatas, and a chatas, right? There's no way of transferring kedusha. You can't bring a chatas as a nedava, so you have to throw it to the Yamamelech, or if it's an animal, you'd have to let it die. Halacha Moshe Sinai over here, unspecified funds, they go and they're used for ketzim mizbeach, olos. Karbanos ola that are brought when the Mizbeach does not have other karbanos being brought. So Amar halacha hi ben Nazir v'suleka. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai only by Nazir. This halacha applies somewhere else. V'atani v'braisa v'shar chai v'kinin shebetorah she'frishu mos l'kineim. Kineim is a masechta called Kinim. Kinim talks about a pair of birds. Certain people, they bring a pair of birds as their karban. For example, a yoledes, she gives birth. A mitzora, when he has tzaras, and its completion, he's purifying himself at the end of his tzaras period. And also a zava, a woman who sees menstruation, but certain periods of the month, as opposed to a nida, which is other periods of the month, which is delineated more in Maseches Nida. So a zava, and a zava always brings two birds. One's a chatas, one's an ola. And Asha, a Mesora, and the Oledas, if they're very poor, they end up, if they're really poor, then they bring flour, they regard mincha. But if they're in the middle, they're modestly poor, like most people. They're living from month to month, and they're constantly spending more than they're earning. So you're falling that middle class. So you bring birds, a chatas, and an ola, one bird, a chatas, and ola. Right? The reason they're comparable to a nazir, the nazir also has to bring a chatas and ola. Obviously, by a nazir, it's an animal. It's not, you can't bring a bird. Shafrishu most l'kineim. They separated money for their pair of birds. Ratzal lahavi behen chatas behema yavi. Not only they didn't specify what the money's for, right? It could be just the money is for one of the birds for the chatas, one of the bird, the ola. The Brisa tells you a bigger chiddush. Not only that, but even if they became rich in the interim, they separated the money and then they became rich, where now they're supposed to bring a lamb. Right? They want to bring an animal, right? Use the money entirely for a chatas animal, or entirely for the ola animal. They could. Mace, let's say they died. Ayulo mos stumin. They had money which was unspecified. Yiplu nadava. So exactly the same halacha nazir. The money is used for nadava, for karbonas, for the case of mizbeach. So there's another example, not just nazir, also by the case of yoledes and mitzora and zava. So the Gemara says Tana nazir. Nazir is just an example, right? And kinim are similar because by Nazir there's a chatas and ola obligatory. Also by kinim, the case in kinim, the regular cases in Maseches Kinim, you're also chayav a chatas and ola. Ulafuke, those two cases, the same rule applies. To exclude a third case, which the same rule does not apply. Ma'adisanya, Mishaya mechuyev chatas. He was chayav a korban chatas. For example, he sinned. Let's say he was machal Shabbos b'shogeg, right? Amar Harei Alai Ola, and then, the fact that you sin, right, is Machayiv Nachatas. And then he makes a statement. He says, "I'm makabel to bring an Ola." Now, The Ola is not a chiyuv, it's an Ola's Nadava. You can do that. The Hifrish most. Yeah, so he's now chayiv a chatas and an Ola. Then he sets aside money. He says these are for my chova. Doesn't specify what it's for. He can't use that money not for a chatas, not for an Ola. Meaning, even though it's unspecified money, because he didn't specify what it's for, he can't just use it for whatever he wants. Because it's a suffix. Was that money for a chatas? Was it for an Ola? What was his kavana? What was his plan when he designated it? Even if he tells you maybe afterward, maybe he's not around to tell you. If he's around to tell you, maybe he changed his mind, or where you change his mind. So he can't bring that money nor for a chatas nor for an Ola. Mace vayulo mo stumin. Let's say he died, right? And he had money that was set aside, was unspecified. Yelchol Yam HaMelech. Similarly, they have to be thrown into the Dead Sea. They can't be used anymore for an adava, like by a Nazir and by Kinim. So that's the case where this halacha doesn't, Moshe Masina doesn't apply. Amar Ravashi. Rashi says, Hada Amras Mufurash and Lo. Actually said that if the money is specified, even by a Nazir, if he specifies the money, we'll see in a second what it means to specify. He says the money, these are for my chatas, Ola, and Shlomim. So then we don't say the halacha l'meshusina that you can bring the karbonos for Keitz and Mizbeach if he dies, right? Lo temad amar el l'chatati el l'asti el l'shalmi. It doesn't mean he has to specifically say, okay, I'm setting aside $100 for my chatas, $100 for my Ola, $100 for my Shlomim. El afil amar el l'chatati l'asti l'shalma. He says set aside $300. He says these $300 are for my chatas, Ola, and Shlomim. The Furushin, that's considered Furushin, that's considered a specified money. If he dies, the Halacha L'Shinai does not apply. Right? As we said, if he dies, so the money for the Chatas has to be used. It has to die. If the animal, let it die. If it's money, throw it to the Yam HaMelech. And the Ol and the Shlomim are brought as Nadava, presumably. V'ika da Amri, Amar Ravashi, Lo Tema Ad Amar El L'Chatasi Lo Lasi L'Shamai. Another version of Ravashi. Even if he didn't say, not only if he said, this $300 is for Chadas, Ola, and Shlomim. Even if he set aside $300, said these are my for chova, these are for my chova, that's considered mefurashim. Now, this is the psak halacha. Now, el chavasi sounds pretty unspecified. It didn't say what it's going to use it for. So we said before that if you have unspecified money, right, you can use it for keitz and mizbeach. So why is this different? So the article says the reason is by saying the word chova, right? The only korban really that's a chova at the end of your naziris is a chatas. So that basically when he says haril chavasi, he's basically saying this is at least partially for like korban chatas, and we're not sure which money is the chatas. Therefore, it's like for Russian, you have to throw into the Yam HaMelech. So, as I explained in Ian Ben Sion yesterday, korban Ola and Shlomim are not really bought for your chova. The Ola is really bought as a present, a doron to Hashem. And the Shlomim is really part of doing business with the Kohanim. They're doing a service for you. So you bring a Karma Shlomim so that Hashem gets a little bit, the Kohanim get a little bit, and you get a little bit. So it's like part of like the brokerage fee for doing business with the Kohanim. So the only thing that's actually for your chova, for the sin that you did by Makabal and Naziros, for answering wine yourself, forbidding yourself in wine, is a Karma Chata. So therefore it's like for Russian. So obviously the case of unspecified money, the Lechem L'Shusina is talking about a case where you just took money and you put it to the side. You didn't say anything. Or you said, Hare Elu L'Nizirusi, right? You didn't say L'Chovasi. By saying L'Chovasi, that's worse. Amar Rava. The Gemara continues. Hada Amran Mo Stumin Yipulun Nadava. That's what you said by a Nazir, right? If it's unspecified money, you said, this is for my Nazirus, right? It goes to Nadava. Im Nafla Dmei Chatas B'nei Harein K'Furashin. If afterwards, right, you set aside, let's say, $500 for your Karbanos, the 3 Karbanos, and then you took $100 and you said, these $100 for my chatas. Harehen can mufurashin. Now, obviously the money left over is only for the Ol and the Shlomim. It becomes like mufurashin. And since it becomes like mufurashin, so therefore, right, so therefore, even though normally, Halacha Moshe B'Sinai tells me, if you were to die afterwards, the money would go Ola for Keitz and Mizbeach. Here they're not used for Keitz and Mizbeach. We don't say, because the whole Halacha Moshe only when there's the money of the Chatas included, right? Because that's what the Torah felt. If you have money which could potentially be for a Chatas, Ola and Shlomim, Torah said use it for Keitz and Mizbeach in that case. But if the Chatas is excluded from that and it's only Ola and Shlomim, then you have a recourse. Bring part for an ola and part for a shlamim that you could do, because a chatas is the only one for kapara, right? And if he dies, he doesn't need kapara. But ola and shlamim you could always bring for nedava. So thereffor, a tree like for Russia, you don't use it for Ketzim Mizbech, you just use it for an Ola, half for an Ola, and half for a Shlama of Nedava, which is different than Ketzim Mizbech. Ketzim Mizbech is basically when you use it as for Olos, only for Olos, when the Mizbech is not in service, and Olos and Shlama are brought right away as Korbanos and Nedava. Tanya Kavasi de Rava, top of Chavam base, a Brisa which is similar to Rava, Elul Chatasi V'Hashar L'Shar Nizirusi. He specifies that he sets aside the money. He says part of the money, $100 out of my $500 for the chatas, and the rest is for the rest of my korbanos of Nazirus, which is a shlam and ola. Dmei chatas, if he dies, dmei chatas yelch liyam hamelech. The money for the chatas goes into the Dead Sea. You can't use it anymore. Rashar yavi chetzil la'ola v'chetzil l'shlam. The rest, you split it up. Half of the money is used for an ola, half of a shlam. Now, let's say you had $500. He said $100 for the chatas. So you got left with $400, right? So $200 is used for a carbon ola, $200 for a carbon shlamim. Umolin bekula, ve'in molin b'miksas. And when it comes to meila, even though technically right, half of the money we use for a shlam, half for an ola. If you to violate meila, which is to take these funds and use it for your personal use, which you're not allowed to do, but Megillah only applies by kachim kachim. So an ola is kachim kachim, and a shlam is kachim kalim. So therefore, in order to commit meila, you have to have used the entire $400. If you use the entire $400, then for sure you committed meila. If you only use $399 for your personal use, we can't say that you violated meila. Now, this is my explanation of the Gemara. The Art Scroll presents a different explanation, which is the Rosh's opinion, who says that the Gemara is lav dafka over here, and the Gemara says Molin Bekulan, a Molin Miksasan, Molin Bekulan means a little more than 200. I mean, if you use 201, because once I use 201, right, if I don't say anything, 200 is for the Ola, 200 is the Shlamim. So they're right, 201, at least one of those that I took was from the Ola, and therefore I did Me'ila. I will tell you a deeper explanation of my shot and why I have a different shot than the Rush. First of all, it seems like that from the words, but I'll explain the Machlokes Ben Sion Lang and the Rush, and Ian with Ben Sion coming up afterwards. The Brisa continues. He says this money is from my Ola. He set aside $500, and $100 he says for the Ola. The Ashar L'Shar Nizirusi. The rest is for the rest of my Kabbalas Nazir, which is the Chatas and the Shlomim. T'mei Ola yaviu Ola Umolin Behen. The money for the Ola, you bring an Ola. He set aside for an Ola. He died now. You bring in an Ola. Now the article says you bring in Ola as a dava. I don't know if it means an Ola as a dava. I explain when you die, it's not like there's complete disconnect, right? A Chatas is complete disconnect. There's no kapara, but in Ola, even if you die, there's an Inyan of bringing a present to Hashem for your Nazirus. Whatever part of Nazirus you accepted upon yourself, or you completed. I believe also the Shlom is Shlom and Chova. That's why I said it earlier. That's why I said yesterday in the previous share that it's a Chova, even though the article says in the Dove, I don't believe. So the Dove, I believe it's a Chova. If you Ola, Molin Behed, Me'ila, and Ola, Carbon Me'ila, Ola is Kachik Kash and Me'ila. Ashar, you pull in the Dava. And the rest falls to the Dava, Umolin, Bekulam, Emolin, and Mixastan. The rest falls in the Dava. So the way the article explains it is that here is the Halakha Mashina does work over here. It is in place because as long as the part of the unspecified money contains a chatas, so that's where the halakha mashina was made to help you out. Because in the case of chatas, you're stuck. So therefore, when part of the unspecified money is chatas, and you didn't specify that it is chatas, or what part of the money is for chatas, so therefore they let you use it for kates mizbeach. So they explain people in the dava use it for kates mizbeach when the mizbeach is batel, it's not being there's no karbanas being brought. You bring the rest of the money for Ketam Mizbeach. And again, the same halacha here. Half of the money is chatas, which is kachek kachim, and half is shlamim. So therefore, only if you use, according to the Rush, 201. And according to me, you have to use all of it in order to violate Me'ila. Amar Huna Amarav Lo Shanu Ela Mos. We're only talking. This halacha Malach Sinai only applies by money, unspecified money. Ava behema. If you set aside behema, even though you set aside 3 animals, so you said hare elu l'nazirusai. Sorry, you set aside one animal, right? You set aside one animal, and you said this is for my nazirus. Now we don't know, is it a chatas or a shlamim? Hare kureshet. that's considered like specifying. It's a suffix whether it's a chatas, ola, or something. We don't know. But because you set aside an animal which could be bought as a korban, right? It's not readily redeemable for cash. It's hard to sell an animal. Since it's hard to sell an animal, so therefore, in a certain sense, it's considered mefurish, like you wanted to use it for a korban, even though you didn't say it could be sold. It's not you're a makdish the animal, but you set it aside. So therefore, it's like mefuresh. Therefore, it's like you specified, and the halacha machine doesn't apply, and because it's a suffix chatas, you have to let it die. Amar of Nachman, hada amri behema harei furesh. That we said an animal is like explicit, lo shan, like he specified, lo shanu el tmima. It's only an animal with no blemishes. Ava balas mum, but has a permanent blemish which disqualifies from being a korban. Harei kistuma, because that right is kedusha's dam. It's obviously something that's going to be sold right away. It needs to be sold right away. It needs to be sold because you can't bring it as a korban. So therefore, it's considered unspecified. It's like cash, basically. It's like cash. You can't use it as a korban. If the animal is possible to use as a korban, so maybe someone would be makriv as a korban. So you can't equate it with cash. It's not readily going to be sold for cash. But when it's completely disqualified from the mizbeach, so you're going to sell it right away. Aval nascha lo. Oh, sorry. Aval smum hareyu kistuma. Aval nascha lo. But he continues, but a bar of gold, right? A bar of gold is not considered, right? It's hard to sell a bar of gold. No one's going to give you cash for a bar of gold right now, especially now that, people don't really collect bars of gold. And our whole financial system is not backed by gold anymore. So gold is not worth. It used to be a bar of gold worth a lot of money, but in 1970s when they went off the gold standard, in America at least, so it's not as valuable. So it's not readily available to be sold, so you can't consider it cash. Rav Nachman Yizak Amar Afilu Nascha. If you have a bar of gold, that would be considered unspecified funds. And if you specified a bar of gold for your kabbanos for Naziris, you could sell the bar of gold and use all the money for Ketzim Mizbeach, which is the Chomesh Mitzine. Aval Soar Shal Koros Lo. However, if you had beams of wood that were made for building a house, right? So those are harder to sell, right? You have beams of wood. It's hard. People are not going to buy beams of houses, right? Usually you go to Home Depot, you buy beams for your house, you buy wood to make into beams. So once it's already in the form of beams, no one's going to buy it off of you. It's hard to sell. It's not like you go on eBay or something like that and sell wooden beams. So that's the conclusion of today's shir. That's where we're going to stop today because the ensuing discussion goes on to Chav Zayin and Aleph, and Chav Zayin and Aleph is very short. So we're going to stop over here. We'll discuss more about the differences between bars of gold and beams. Are they comparable to actual money, which has the din halacha Moshe Sinai of Yibul and Nadav, of you falling for Ketzim Mizbeach? I want to discuss in Yom Ben Sion, like I mentioned, this halacha over here of Me'ila over here, where how much of the money that's unspecified do you have to actually use? All of it, or rov or kulo, in order to be chayav Me'ila? I'll talk about my opinion and the Russia's opinion. Yom Ben Sion coming up next.